Good morning.
Good morning.
And I trust everybody can hear me all the way in the back. Good. You seem far away from me. But as long as you can hear, that's what matters. It is a delight to be here with you this morning. I have been with some of you since, well, Thursday, actually, and then Friday, and then Saturday, and now this morning. And it's been just wonderful to enjoy Sacramento for the first time and the lovely hospitality that I have received from the folks here at Trinity. I'm so thankful. The Absolom Jones Center in Atlanta is the place where I spend most of my time and most of my energy and effort in an effort to be a voice for God in this world, in helping us to think about building bridges across the many divides that we've constructed to create the world the way we wanted the world to be instead of the way in which God intended the world to be. And I am honored to be asked and trusted with that work, and always honored that anybody wants to ask me to come and talk to them anywhere about that work, because it's so important to me. And I believe so much that it is possible for us to build those bridges if we can just manage to step back a little bit and allow God's Spirit to be engaged with us as God would like to be engaged. So I bring you greetings from the Diocese of Atlanta and from Bishop Rob Wright, and what he likes to say are the 50+ thousand men, women, children, and feisty seniors, and I'm one of the feisty seniors. But for right now, I would like to ask you to take a little bit of time to reflect with me about this gospel story. I don't really think the scripture is worth much if it doesn't mean something to us individually and personally. So I want to invite you to join me in a little exercise of putting yourself into this gospel and seeing where you find yourself located. Are you Jesus? Are you the grumblers? Are you Zacchaeus? Where would you be? Who would you be if you stepped into this story? Where would you locate yourself? Think about that for a second or two. You know, we've heard so much scripture throughout our lives, particularly if we've been in church very long. And after a while, we just kind of listen to it, and then we just go to the next thing. But Jesus is always asking us not to go to the next thing too quickly. Jesus is always talking about what we think he's talking about, and then talking about more than what we think he's talking about. And we can't catch on to that unless we stop a minute and pay attention. So where are you in this story? Think about that for a few seconds. And then I want to ask you to answer the question, if you find yourself being Zacchaeus, do you want to have a better view of Jesus? Or new view of Jesus? Or maybe a first view of Jesus? It's possible to have talked about Jesus and been following Jesus and not paying much attention to who that person is. In the modern era, where do we find this energy, this Jesus energy in the modern era? I used to run around when I was younger, kind of wishing I could find somebody in the crowd that actually had on a robe with a rope around his waist and sandals. But that would be a funny sight in this modern era. So I guess finally I came to the conclusion that I would have just been finding somebody dressed in blue jeans or something that, you know, would not, because Jesus pretty much fitted in with the era in which he was living. So I guess he would have been that kind of person. But do you wonder if you encountered the personal Jesus on October 30th, 2022, what he might look like, who he might be. And if you were somewhere and heard that this man Jesus was coming and you wanted to see him, what would you have to do to catch a good glimpse of him? You know, here's this guy, Zacchaeus, who is tax collectors were not the most popular people in the community in this day. And yet there was something in him that made him know that there was something about this guy that he needed to pursue, to the point that he was willing, basically, to make a fool out of himself. Because, you know, you climb a tree. I mean, that's a child climbing a tree is kind of cute. A grown person climbing a tree makes you wonder which mental health place you need to take them to. Or what's the matter with them? I mean, we have days that maybe make us want to climb a tree, but we don't necessarily go and do it. And then not only was this a grown-up, but this was the tax collector. So he's got some notoriety, maybe not, people weren't just really in love with him, but he's got some notoriety anyway. So he wants to see Jesus enough to make a fool out of himself. And so my question is, do we want to see Jesus enough to make a fool out of ourselves today? And if that is the case, what would we need to do for that to be the case? So I want to say to you that I think rather than needing to climb a tree because we're short in stature like Zacchaeus, that what we need to do is let go of some of our narratives in our heads, some of our stories, some of our ways we have constructed reality for ourselves, some of the ways that we have been in the world perhaps need to be reimagined and investigated so we can catch a better glimpse of Jesus. And in the process of doing that, would we be making a fool out of ourselves a little bit? Because people around us would be surprised that you used to think this way and now you think this way. What happened to you? And most of the time, it's difficult for us to reimagine our positions and our ways of being in the world because the ego is really invested in us not looking stupid. You know, the ego is invested in maintaining the status quo. So basically for me, Zacchaeus climbing the tree is very symbolic of defying the ego, because his ego should have kept him from climbing a tree. I mean, you know, you're the tax collector. People don't like you in the first place. And now you're going to go out and climb a tree, you know, to kind of confirm maybe even further why they don't like you. So what do you have to do? What do we have to do as we sit in this lovely space on this lovely morning in Northern California with all of our lovely resources and our freedoms and our privileges and our possessions and all of the things that we've got? What do we have to do to catch a better glimpse of Jesus? That would be the major question to be asked. After deciding if you really want to be Zacchaeus, or do you just want to be one of the grumblers, or do you just think you got it kind of all together and you don't need to be any of them? I doubt there's anybody with that thought, actually. And then I wonder, what would it mean for you to catch that greater glimpse? What would be the result? Because when Zacchaeus encountered Jesus, isn't it curious to you that he starts out with this confession? What was it that made him, he said he wanted, at least the writer says, We don't know really what Zacchaeus said, but we know what the story tells us. So I'm going with the story since I wasn't there. He confesses. He knows something is not right, that needs to be fixed. So when Jesus says to him, hurry up, you come down from that tree because I need to come to your house, that had to be disconcerting because you don't even know who this guy really is, and you're up in a tree trying to see him, and he evidently knows something about you. He calls you by name. That would have been enough to set me off into a funny place that I didn't know him, but he calls me by name. So, for me, that's also comforting because God knows our names. And you know what? God knows the name of everybody on the planet. And that means something to me about the way in which I need to think about everybody on the planet. But that's just a little side issue to think about this morning. In addition to this, now Jesus has called his name and said, not only do I know who you are, but I want to come to your house. I mean, good grief. It's pretty forward here, right? But then I find it so amazing that the thing that comes out of his mouth is this business about half of my possessions I will give to the poor. Why does he go to that space? Because he knows he didn't quite get that stuff all the way he should have, and he knows that he needs to do something about it. Maybe he's never heard of the word reparations, but he's ready to practice it. He's ready to give back because he knew that he got some of this stuff in a way that wasn't the best way. And then, if he ever defrauded anybody for anything, he's willing to give them 4 times what he took. And he says all of this to this stranger that he's up in a tree trying to see. And you just got to ask yourself, what's really going on here? Zacchaeus is supposed to not even know this guy, but yet he feels like he needs to say all of this to him. So I'm just so moved by the fact that there's always this sub-conversation, this spirit working, this kind of like, here's on the surface what's happening, but underneath is a whole nother life cycle going on. So something's been going on in Zacchaeus, something's going on in Jesus, and they connect. And out of this man's mouth comes this confession. So, what do we need to confess when we encounter Jesus? What are you willing to do to see him? What do you need to do to see him better? And what will it take for us to catch a new glimpse of Jesus today? As we sit here in the 21st century, with the world going basically to hell in a handbasket, what do we need to do to be the people of peace, to be the people that are contented, to be the people that God's light can shine through in the midst of a world that doesn't know a whole lot about light? We're about to have an election in a couple of weeks, and people are all in a dither about it, and I think God wishes us to settle down. To settle down and have a little faith. Because no matter what happens, you're going to wake up the next morning and you're still going to be your person. You're not going to just drop dead because your person didn't win, or you're not going to jump up and down and catch wings and become an angel if your person did win. You're going to still be who you are. And you're still going to have to do whatever you've got to do. And you're still going to be called to be in the world however you've been called to be in the world. So I think that God is interested in us not allowing so many winds to blow us around. God is interested in us being like Zacchaeus, anxious to catch new glimpses of this Holy One and seeing what the message might be that comes to our hearts when we've caught that glimpse. So I don't know you. You're here. I don't know you. I see your lovely faces, and it's just beautiful sitting here looking out there at you. But God knows every specific thing about everybody and is waiting to speak to us in that space, to give to us the word, the challenge, the hope, the gift, whatever it is that we need to have. This is the understanding that helped the slaves to never quit believing that life was worth living. This is the understanding that allows people to pack themselves up and walk thousands of miles to get to the border of our country, seeking a better life. That hope, that belief that there's a God in the universe that's bigger than the messes we have made, bigger than all of the ways in which we have managed to mess up God's intention. God is big enough to encompass all of that and give us the grace to make a difference. So, Jesus is coming to your house this afternoon. What do you have to say to him? God bless you.